When it comes to racist organizations, the NRA is low-hanging fruit. Not because they're actually racist, but because we have a mainstream media that needs them to be. So they collectively go out of their way to paint the racist label on the NRA while ignoring anything the NRA does that proves otherwise. Think about it. John Oliver did a 20-minute monologue on NRATV and completely ignored the 34-year-old black guy with one of the longest-running shows on the network. You think that was by accident? Hell, I do an interview with Killer Mike and the media slaughters him for it. Next thing I know, I see them using the most disgusting race baiting imaginable to try to delegitimize his opinion.
I cannot believe he has allowed himself to be a puppet for the NRA, and I believe that the only reason the NRA is doing it is because it will sell more guns. Any person who is fearful of black men will take one look of that man wearing his gold chain, and what are they going to do? They're going to run out to whatever local store they can, and they're going to get another gun. Right. It's a vicious cycle.
But when the NRA comes to the aid of a black person, these people are nowhere to be found. They're nowhere to be found because if they actually point out the fact that the NRA has done more than any organization to protect the Second Amendment rights of African Americans, yeah, I just said that, she likely wouldn't have a show. The fact that a renowned group like the Buffalo Soldiers were NRA members probably wouldn't sit well with the mainstream media overlords. And acknowledging that the NRA had a board member like civil rights activist Roy Ennis would likely send them and their "I think the NRA is the KKK because the TV told me so" audience into self-destruct mode. Look, I get it. The media has been painting the NRA as the most racist group on the planet, but with just a little research, you'll soon realize the media hasn't exactly been honest about the NRA's history with black people. Because of this, I now have to re-educate you on everything that you thought you knew, but didn't know you didn't know about the NRA and black folk. So here's what I want you to decide. Are you willing to have an open mind? Are you willing to accept that not everything you've been led to believe is based in fact? Are you willing to extend to me the courtesy of at least explaining how I, a young black man with views on many issues that fall far outside the Republican mainstream, came to believe no organization represents my interests better than the NRA? I know many of you won't be willing to give me a chance, but for those of you who will, I put together this episode specifically for you on the intersection between race, the Second Amendment, and the NRA. All I ask is that you watch. I remember when I first got the call from the NRA. I didn't really believe it was the NRA. Honestly, I didn't know very much about the NRA beyond the fact that they were the largest gun rights organization in the country. Oh, and that they were also a low-key racist KKK neo-Nazi hate group. At least that's what all the media outlets had been not so subtly insinuating my whole life. I never actually verified it or looked into it. I just kind of let it sit on my subconscious as an unverified truth. So when I got the call, I wasn't the most receptive person in the world. But it's not every day that you get a call from the most powerful gun rights organization on the planet asking you to continue doing what you were already doing on your own for the last 5 years. This isn't a black or white, Democrat or Republican issue. This is common sense. This is self-preservation. It's about natural rights. Except now, they want you to do it on their platform. So I listened. Immediately after the call, I thought, last I checked, the KKK wasn't calling young black men to join their ranks. And I'm pretty positive the neo-Nazis want nothing to do with the young black urban gun enthusiasts. But I just got a call from the NRA, and they're supposed to be all of those things, and it wasn't adding up. So I did what I do best. I Googled. These days, it's all the rage to be woke, especially on Instagram and Twitter. And like becoming a vegan, you're apparently supposed to tell everyone how woke you are. The problem is there's no real standard for being woke. So the entire concept is like one big-ass intellectual participation trophy. As long as you say you're woke, then, well, you're woke. Suffice it to say, in doing my research about the NRA, I became woke to a lot of things about the NRA that I didn't know. But if you don't believe anything I say here, Google is your best friend. There have always been and will continue to be elements in this country trying to vigorously keep guns out of the hands of black people. During the time of slavery, it was done with brute force and oppression. During the civil rights movement, it was done with laws. Today, it's done with the media telling minorities that the most powerful gun rights organization, who they can't stand because, as they say with their own words,
the NRA is non-discriminatory when it comes to who gets guns, including terrorists.
Is also racist and doesn't care about minority gun owners.
The NRA was now a white supremacist group.
If you look close enough, there's a contradiction somewhere in there. I think it's between the NRA wants to arm everybody, and then the NRA doesn't care about minority gun owners. From where I'm standing, it's just not adding up. But then again, they don't want it to add up. Because the most dangerous thing in the world for every anti-gun force out there would be for minorities to become woke to the fact that they are being deliberately misled about the NRA and its history. Once people come to understand the NRA, as I have, an organization dedicated to protecting the constitutional rights of all people, once people get that, well, they'll come to understand that today's anti-gun mainstream media, politicians, and power-hungry billionaires are nothing more than frauds. They don't want you to have guns. They just want to use you for their own agenda. So they sell you a story that an organization that actually wants to protect their rights is racist. They do this to blind you from the truth, banking on the fact that you won't do your own Googles to verify it. And in my opinion, it's time to separate fact from fiction, a simple lesson we all learned in school. So let me educate you on some of the tactics the media, politicians, and anti-gun billionaires use to paint the NRA as racist. It's time to go back to school. Listen closely. Take notes. Today's lesson is truth. Throughout my life, I've been called a nigger, monkey, coon, and a host of other sophomoric racial slurs by people who have the mental acuity of a doormat. However, I never felt more offended than I did when I became an NRA commentator and was instantly judged by the left-leaning media as a fake, a prop, a token, and a fabrication simply because I was black. I personally know this tactic of those unjustly calling the NRA racist in an effort to advance their anti-gun agenda. It's called judgment, the act of believing you know how someone else should live their life, and if they don't follow it, you assassinate their character. Let's learn about it. When some mindless mouth breather lobs a racial slur against me, I know it's the result of ignorance and insecurity and a supremely awe-inspiring level of stupidity. However, when people who are supposed to be journalists, educated, and allegedly intelligent people relegate me to nothing more than my race and not my merit, or judge my decision to be an advocate for something based solely on my race, that's the result of a conscious superiority complex masquerading as a progressive, also known as judgment. For 6 years, I produced video after video, and in more ways than one, advocating the Second Amendment. Over those 6 years, I built a huge following of people. I didn't plan it. It just so happened that there were a ton of people who didn't care about my race that agreed with me on the issue. Yet all I kept hearing from the other side was, how can you as a young black man be an advocate for guns? Never once asking the same question to my white counterparts. The media wrote article after article attacking me, judging me, and trying to discredit my credibility and authenticity. And every single piece had the same stench of, how can you as a black man? As if my personal ideologies, beliefs, and personality are a given simply because I'm black. For a group of people who pride themselves on acceptance and progressive thoughts and ideas, the covert racism is at an all-time high. Judgment. Let's learn about willful ignorance. Defined as a decision in bad faith to avoid becoming informed about something so as to avoid having to make undesirable decisions that such information might prompt. This is a favorite tactic of the anti-gun media. They often deploy it when calling the NRA racist. It's one thing to be ignorant. It's a whole nother thing to purposefully try not to learn the facts. Second only to struggling college students who purposefully avoid looking at their bank account balance when pulling money from the ATM, the mainstream media are the most egregious perpetrators of willful ignorance I've ever seen. It's almost overwhelming, as if there's a concerted effort on behalf of those outlets to make the NRA all of these things, whether it's true or not. For ages, the mainstream media have fetishized the idea that the NRA is a neo-Nazi organization. Yet, in 1940, the NRA helped collect over 7,000 firearms to send to the British to help them defend against a potential invasion by Nazi Germany. Last I checked, Nazi sympathizers don't send guns to the people fighting the Nazis. Now let's talk about the NRA being the KKK, or the marauding clan of mouth-breathing idiots, if you want to be specific. The KKK is a domestic terrorist group formed by 6 Confederate veterans post-Civil War, whose goal was to use violence and intimidation tactics to terrorize and kill black people. The NRA was founded by 2 Union veterans with the primary goal of promoting and encouraging rifle shooting on a scientific basis because they didn't feel the Union soldiers did a good enough job killing Confederate soldiers during the Civil War. Not to mention that guy who led the Union force to victory against the Confederates, Ulysses S. Grant, also served as the 8th president of the NRA. Where the media engages in the most egregious form of willful ignorance is when they push the narrative that the NRA doesn't care about minority gun owners. But the NRA has been fighting for the rights of all gun owners for more than 100 years, including minority gun owners. But because these so-called reporters with degrees from top universities are incapable of researching, I now have to do their job at the risk of pandering to my own people. In 2008, the Supreme Court ruled that Chicago's 28-year-old ban on handgun ownership was unconstitutional. The case was brought in part by a 76-year-old black man who lived in Morgan Park neighborhood that had been taken over by gangs and drug dealers. The NRA supported and argued on behalf of McDonald, a black man whose gun rights, according to the mainstream media, the NRA is not supposed to care about. Josephine Byrd, an elderly black woman, her building was overrun with crime, drugs, and prostitutes. Josephine wanted a gun for protection, but the Wilmington Housing Authority banned their elderly tenants from owning a gun for protection. Did any of the people who claim the NRA doesn't care about minority gun ownership step up and help Ms. Byrd? No, but the NRA did. They helped her sue the Housing Authority, where the Delaware Supreme Court ruled in her favor. Ms. Byrd was later specially recognized at the NRA membership meeting and was also featured in a national TV ad paid by the NRA that, as you guessed, most of the media ignored. None of these examples were exceedingly hard to find. I didn't have to travel to Timbuktu and climb some mountain to locate a secret library where this information was hidden. I simply took 30 minutes of looking past the biased accusations from the anti-gun media, and poof, there it was. But I guess in a day and age of IG memes and 140-character tweets, one can't be pressed to actually research beyond headlines. For those who lob accusations of racism at the NRA without any justification, you know the word privilege is not far behind. Ironically, the same people who throw around the word privileged are themselves guilty of it. So let's learn of privilege. Getting to make false claims about a group of people, and because you belong to a group of privilege, you're not held accountable. I think people fail to realize that there are different types of privilege, and like a lot of ingredients in our food these days, some of them are artificially made. I call them the fabricated untouchables. They're a social construct made by anti-gunners who rely on the constraints that hyper-political correctness places on social discourse to shield themselves from critique while they make every false accusation in the book against anyone who disagrees with them. You see this form of social justice warrior privilege clearly when it comes to the issue of women and guns.
The NRA just reinforced what we already knew about them, that they were a sexist, racist organization that only stands for the rights of white gun owners.
They get away with labeling an entire organization as sexist that consists of 5 million members. An organization that has had several female presidents, is the biggest group advocating female self-protection against abusive spouses, rape, and attacks, has entire platforms dedicated to female Second Amendment rights, yet and still women like Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory can claim progressive privilege and call the NRA racist and sexist without any accountability because they lead a useless women's march, which is only beneficial to women in name, that they themselves barely march in, yet these same women are anti-gun and would rather a woman be relegated to peeing on herself to stop a rapist instead of her having a gun to blow the rapist away. But guess what's going to happen after this video comes out? I'm going to be labeled a sexist misogynist simply for critiquing the real benefits of a women's march against an organization who spends countless dollars and resources fighting for women's right to own a firearm unencumbered by overreaching gun control laws. Let's talk about hate. An intense and irrational dislike for anything that stands in their way of power and control. The media projects its hate and people it doesn't like on an hourly basis. You'd be hard-pressed to find another organization in this country that the mainstream media and anti-gun politicians hate more than the NRA. Their ultimate goal is power and control. They want you so powerless that the political and financial elite don't have to worry about you exerting power when they become more tyrannical, or so defenseless that you have to rely on them for your safety, which means they completely and utterly control you. This is why they hate, not dislike, not annoyed with, but hate the NRA. They hate the NRA because it's the biggest obstacle standing in the way of their goal of power and control, because you can't control people who have the ability to adequately defend themselves. And people who can adequately defend themselves don't have to rely on them for their safety. They don't even bother hiding this fact. Every chance they get, they're telling people how they can't pass more gun control laws because of the NRA. As if the NRA is anything more than the collective power of their over 5 million gun-owning members. They know the power of the NRA is in its membership, so they do everything in their power to dissuade anyone from joining them by attacking the reputation of those members.
The NRA's position reminds me of negotiating with the Iranians or the communists.
What's so disgusting about it is that they use hate to do it. They exploit the racial sensitivities and past of unassuming minorities by collectively pushing the rhetoric that the NRA is a racist hate organization who at best doesn't care about minority gun owners and at worst hates them. Yet this is the same media and political elites who in one breath say, don't join the NRA, they're racist, they don't care about minority gun owners. And then in another breath, push gun control laws that disproportionately affect the ability of minorities to own guns. Then when the NRA steps in to contest these gun laws, they say, oh, the NRA wants to arm thugs and drug dealers in the inner city. Their agenda has nothing to do with saving lives. It's about undermining the only organization powerful enough to stop them from accomplishing their goal of slowly eradicating the Second Amendment. For years, I've watched the mainstream media and anti-gun politicians push a false narrative about not only the NRA, but gun owners. I've accepted that in the mainstream media, real journalism is dead and has been replaced with celebrity reporters pushing their own agendas and ideologies, which always seem to be one-sided when it comes to guns, the NRA, and the Second Amendment. When I started doing this, I just wanted to shoot guns and make gun videos. But because you insist on being dishonest about the Second Amendment and the NRA, which seeks to protect the right for all American citizens, I'm now forced to hold you all accountable at every turn. I'm going to be the gnats at a barbecue, the mosquitoes at a picnic, and the flies at the five-star steakhouses where I know you all eat. And I'm going to expose you all for the agenda-driven, power-hungry, hateful, covert racists that you are from here on out. But I can't do this alone. So I turn to my supporters to take this information out into the world and challenge the false narrative from the anti-gun media, politicians, and power-hungry billionaires and call them out on their BS.